Hi, I'm George Nordhaus, and welcome to Monday Morning. We are going to have the second of what I hope will be a series for the next 10 years. I don't know. That's fair, Sheldon. But Sheldon Snodgrass is from Steady Sales. He was brought to me attention by some of our members. Said he's a guy that you really want to get on sales, and I didn't know. So Sheldon, and he did this first webinar a few months ago. We decided we're going to. I decided. I hope he's with me. I think he is. We're going to try to do one at least every quarter, because what we're really developing is a whole big sales pitch program, like that. Let me tell you about Sheldon. He is, that's what he does. So let me show you his picture here, if I may. Okay, there he is. Hey, good looking young guy there, whatever. I shouldn't say that. Anyhow.
Yeah. You're going to get in trouble for sexual harassment.
I know it, and it's too easy these days. But he really works with CSRs. He's, to my knowledge, I don't know anybody else that does in the country like this, honestly. And are there anybody? Does anybody just do CSR type thing, Sheldon, or
Well, there's certainly plenty of folks out there who are providing sales coaching. What their audiences are, I don't know, but I'd love to think I'm the only guy doing this business, but I'm certainly not.
Well, yeah, but from the standpoint of going to what you do for CSRs, and I want to get this in the hands of every CSR and every agency that gets this email, so because I think it's unusual. Okay, I'm going to leave it up to you. Go for it. I'm not going to get in your way.
Well, hey, from your lips to God's ears, get this in the hand of every CSR in the country. I'd love that. And I appreciate the introduction, George, and I also appreciate your optimism about us having enough longevity to do a series of these together. I'm certainly at your service, and I would be honored to be back to record a few of these.
That's very kind of you, and let's do it. Go ahead.
And I certainly don't want to spend any more time than you already have credentialing myself or giving you my complete bio. If you're curious and you're on the line, go to steadysales.com. You'll read all about it. All you need to know for this purpose is my focus is exclusively on helping CSRs get more comfortable embracing the sales side of their service role. Right. And that means upselling, cross-selling, and closing new business in a way that's confident and compelling. And my belief is that it's small changes, not big changes, that will yield long-term big results. And what I want to do is just recap very briefly. I spent the better part of 45 minutes to an hour some weeks ago with you, George, on a webinar, and you got some good feedback about that content. And before I go deeply into new stuff, I just want to do a quick recap, if I could, for those who are hearing me for the first time, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
And I began in a slightly unusual way. What you see here is a photograph of a poet named Maya Stein, who wrote a beautiful poem called The Quiet Hum of Industry. And I excerpted one line, and I want to share it with you now. And she writes, "But this is where the work gets done, this quiet hum of industry away from the world's fluorescent attention." And of course, that was one phrase in a 10-line poem. But this notion of the work gets done away from the world's fluorescent attention is absolutely true, because we're in a public environment, in a public job with colleagues all around us, but really improving our sales outcomes and our service outcomes is very much of a private journey, right? How we react to people, how we make our sales asks, how we deal with objections, that's all a private enterprise. You can certainly get good at that publicly by way of role-playing and having group meetings, but whether you apply that in the moment of choice at every service encounter is purely up to you, right? And that's why I have this idea of these images of a mirror here. So I sometimes joke that the most important sales tool in your toolkit is a mirror, because it requires behavior changes require that we look at ourselves critically and honestly. So that's how I introduced this last time. And then I brought a slide that said, look, when you hear about sales, improving sales outcomes, what exactly do we mean? Because there are so many things that could impact sales outcomes. And here I have a partial list. Last month, I introduced this item 1. I'm going to reprise that and then add the 2 others. I call them the big 3. The big 3 are, how do I make that bridge from the service task, call it a vehicle change or a coverage question or any inbound call, and how do I bridge that to a sales ask? Next, if I do that more, the more and more I ask, of course, the good news is the more and more you get. But also the bad news is the more and more no's you get, right? That's just like a law of gravity. The more you ask, the more you get. Of course, the more you ask, the more you don't get.
How well we know.
Exactly. And so I said, look, let's deal with handling objections or resistance. And I'm getting increasingly uh, uh, what's the word, disillusioned by the word handling objections, because it implies a level of slipperiness, if you will. But what really I'm talking about is dealing with the customer's initial knee-jerk reflexive response that says, no, I'm not interested in more insurance, before they even know what that insurance is or what it does or how much it will cost. So if you call me, George, and you added an auto policy, and I bridge to a conversation about umbrella, and before you even say anything else, you say, no, I'm not interested. I don't want to pay more for my insurance. Mm-hmm. Or if I say, hey, I notice you don't have a tenant's policy on your monoline home, and you say, no, I don't want to pay more insurance. You're not even responding from a place of knowledge about how much it costs or what it does. That's the kind of objection I'm talking about handling. Okay? And then the third one of these big three is trial closing. So many of us get in the habit of trial quoting. Someone says, oh, sure, send me a quote, and it goes into the place I call follow-up purgatory, and I want to talk about how we can reduce that. So here's a graphic that can help you think about the transition from the service task to the sales ask. So where I wrote the word service task, just imagine whatever that is, it's the thing that occupies you 5, 10, 15, 20 times a day when a customer walks in, calls in, or emails in. Right? They're calling you for a purpose. This isn't outbound proactive calling. This is the inbound reactive service task. And once that's completed, we have to bridge to an ask, right? Because you called me with your agenda, George. Now it's my turn as the CSR to bridge. And I teach 3 words that everybody already uses intuitively when they are doing this. Mm-hmm. And those 3 words are, I noticed that. Right? You could say it any way you want. You could say, hey, well, I've got your account up, George. A couple of things jumped out at me. Or I see a couple of small gaps in your protection. Some way to bridge from your agenda to mine. And then the ask is, hey, George, I see that you're missing something called a renter's policy. It protects your personal property in your home or your apartment and any theft that takes place from your vehicle. I'm curious, do you mind if I ask, how come you don't have that protection in place? Not, hey, George, would you like me to quote this? Or, hey, George, would you like me to send you some information about this? That is an offer. It's far easier for a customer to say, I don't know, what do you mean? What does that coverage do? Why would you ask? Right? Mm-hmm. If I ask you, why don't you have this in place? Or do you mind if I ask you why? You're much more inclined to say, well, be something truthful. You might very well say, oh, I'm not interested, but just give me a second. I'm going to talk about that in a moment when I get to my slide right here on the bell curve. This is the bell curve of potential responses, okay? Mm-hmm. So again, this is a recap, and I just want you to sit with that phrase. I noticed that, and may I ask why? Okay? Good. That's a bridging and an ask statement that's very different than what I hear in the field, which is, I noticed this is missing. Would you be interested in a quota for that? Or would you be interested in me adding that? Right? That's it. So another thing that I talked about is if we're going to improve the outcomes, and let's say they're the cross-sell outcomes because we're going to boost the amount of time we transition a task to an ask, right? If you want to improve that, that's the outcome. Look at that star in the middle of these 4 overlapping circles. Mm-hmm. I call that the sweet spot of growth. And it means that we're paying attention to these 4 things, and I've listed them on the right. Buy-in says, I'm willing to do this. I recognize that it's my job. I'm willing to stretch myself and grow. I'm willing to practice certain things. I'm willing to hear no more often. Right? That's what I mean by buy-in. Focus says you can't get good at all skills all at once. You can't learn how to ask for a referral, overcome objections, sell umbrella, sell EPLI, sell cyber liability, and know all the carriers that your agency might represent. So focus demands, well, the third circle demands that we focus on the second, right? So I'm bought in. I focus so that I can therefore practice. Right, so if I said, hey, George, let's get focused on improving the number of referrals that we get from our friends and family. You would say, okay, that's a great idea. I do that already. And I would say, great, what do you say? And if whatever you said generates lots of referrals, I'd say, heck, keep doing it. But a lot of agents, they say, hey, George, would you keep us in mind for friends and family if they ever have a need, send them our way? To which you always politely say, sure, no problem. But no referrals ever come. right? So
Yeah,
that's
right.
what I mean. That's
Right.
what I mean when I say what you focus on, you by design have to practice if you want to improve it. And then how do we know that improvement or those practices working? Because we count, we measure. And last time I spoke about this paradox of measurement, right? Because we tend to focus here on the goal. How much did I write? What was my retention mechanism? What was my retention ratio this month? When I think, well, we're trying to improve behavior, it makes more sense to focus on the things that drive goals versus, in other words, focus on process, not outcome. And so I put 3 little examples on the bottom of things that I encourage CSRs and their managers to measure temporarily. Stop focusing on how much you wrote or bound in a given period and start focusing on, number 1, how many customer touches did you have yesterday and today and tomorrow? So just for like a period of a week and then another week, just count, because if most people, when they guess high. They guess that they're talking to more customers than they really are, because it's easy to conflate things like calls with the mortgage originators and the bankers and the car dealers and the underwriters and the territory sales managers for certain carriers. A CSR has lots of call volume, but not all of it is customers. So the first thing I say is, look, let's just get a sense of how many customers you're talking to. And then here's where you pull out that mirror. Remember I mentioned this powerful sales tool,
Mm-hmm.
the pocket mirror?
Yep.
You have to ask, how many times do I hear myself making an ask, any ask, that would add revenue and boost protection? Right? That's a very a critical question to have to ask yourself, because you can't say, if you're just focusing on the goals, you can't say, how much did I write, how much did I write? You have to ask, well, how much did you ask? Make sense?
Yeah, it does. And are you asking the CSR to measure this? Is that CSR going to tell his or her boss, these are the number of customer touches, these are the number of asks?
Well, in my experience, George, not to take anything away from CSRs, but I'll say that all of us struggle with doing things that are extra without some built-in accountability mechanism. So I use a simple tracking sheet.
Okay.
And I say, if the manager is engaged or a CSR is very committed, I say, look, just pull out this tracking sheet, and I want you to put a tick mark. It's a simple grid. On the top of the grid, it says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then total. And then down the left side, it says number of touches, number of asks, and then yes or no. So every time a customer calls, you just put a little tick mark in the box. So that's what I'm suggesting. And generally, it's not something that a CSR wants to do on their own, and I don't blame them. They're busy. But if you want to get a real handle on how often you're asking or what you're closing, then it makes sense to ask, well, how many times are you asking? And of those asks, what percentage are those asks of the total volume that you're talking to? All right? So I don't want us to get lost here. I'm just saying that if we're focused on these 4 overlapping circles, buy-in, focus, practice, and measure, the measurement goes to the little steps, not the big steps. That's all I'm saying here. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I understand.
Okay. Okay. And you also understand how this is something that most individuals wouldn't do on their own.
No,
which
I
is why
understand that much.
Yeah.
That really.
Well, that's why I think it's helpful to do this with a team. If you have a team that's doing this or a manager that's involved, consider it a thought experiment.
Absolutely.
Consider it a thought experiment. Yeah. All right. So then here are the 7 simple words. I introduced these already. Here they are in a puzzle piece, right? It's a way that we link the transition, I noticed that, to a sales ask. And the sales ask isn't, can I send you this thing, but rather, how come you don't have this in place? I noticed a small gap. All right, now if you think about that question, George, I noticed you're missing, let's just stick with a simple example, like a tenant's policy, right? Hey, George, I've gone ahead and added your vehicle. I'm just going to make you the customer, and I'm the CSR. And you call me for a vehicle change. We're wrapping up the call, and I say, hey, George, before I let you go, I'm looking at your account, and I see that you don't have protection in place for your personal property or any liability in your apartment or if anything ever stolen out of your car. Do you mind if I ask how come you don't have that in place? What are you likely to say? What would you say?
I don't know. Yes. No. What should I say?
Well, be honest. Put yourself in a role play. You're a customer. You called me for a vehicle change.
Yep.
And then I ask you at the end of that transaction, you're my customer. Hey, George, your car's all set. By the way, congratulations on that Tesla. That's a beautiful car you bought. But before I let you go, I'm looking at your account, and I see you don't have, it's called a renter's policy. It protects you for your personal property in your apartment or if anything's ever stolen out of the car. How come, George? Do you mind if I ask why you don't have that in place?
No, we'll go. Well, I don't mind telling you. Nobody's ever asked me. I didn't even know that was there.
Okay, so that's a likely answer. You might say, I don't know, what does it do? I didn't know about that. Tell me more. How much would it be? Right? So this is a bell curve, and I put this up here kind of as a joke, George, because, you know, when you ask a question, this is a normal distribution, right? And if you ask a question, at one end of the extreme, you have crazy people like me who say yes to everything. That's the guy on the right. And on the left, you have Ebenezer Scrooge. You have Ebenezer Scrooge who says, no, humbug, I don't like it. So I want you to just sit with the power of this question. May I ask why? And you can word it any way you want, right? Which is, it could be like, hey, I'm just curious, George. You mind telling me? I saw a couple gaps. How come you don't have that covered? Right? Whatever is comfortable for you as the CSR. My point is, don't make an offer here. Just ask with genuine curiosity, how come you have this gap in place? And the answer, more likely, is, I don't know. What is it? What does it do? I never thought about it. No one ever told me about it.
Right.
That's likely to happen most of the time. Of course, sometimes you get a guy like me who totally puts myself in my agent's hands and tells me, should I have it? Yes, go ahead and add it. If you say, I will. But at the other extreme, we have, it's the next slide, objections. And that's the second of the big three I wanted to talk about, right? The ask, the objection, and the trial close. So hang on to your hats for a second, George, and just know that the objections come on this end of the bell curve, right?
Yep.
So most times, don't forget, the question that I'm asking is, hey, how come you don't have this in place? I'm just curious. And I've asked it in a friendly and genuine way. Most of the time, people aren't going to say, like Scrooge, go away, I don't like you, I don't like insurance, I already pay too much, it's too expensive, why are you trying to sell to me? Right? I mean, generally speaking, people aren't going to respond that way. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. I think you're right. Generally.
I mean, generally speaking, if you called me for a vehicle change, you're in a decent mood, you got a couple of minutes, and you called me to change cars, or you asked me a billing question. And mind you, this is very important. Let me go back to this slide. I'm not talking about asking everybody that calls, because if someone calls and they're in a crisis or a claim and a cancellation,
oh, yeah.
You're not going to offer it to them. Right? That's the kind of person here who I would say you're already starting off in a deficit position. Like, why bother trying to talk about umbrella or a tennis policy to someone who's yelling at you? My point is,
you know, I love that question. May I ask why? I've been thinking about that a lot since you talked before. May I ask why? Gosh almighty, that says so much without saying so much. It's so easy.
Well, it is, and I appreciate that you say that. But let's deal with those people who might respond even to that innocent and genuinely curious question from a place of interest, right? From a place of professional service, they've asked that. Even still, someone might say, "Oh no, I already paid too much for my insurance." Right? I say, hey, George, I'm curious, how come you don't have this renter's policy in place? Your answer might be over here on this end of the spectrum. Oh, Sheldon, you know, the reason is I don't like paying for my insurance, or I already pay too much, or it's going to cost me too much money, or I already got it in place someplace else. Right? That's possible. Right?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so we're in agreement that most of the answers are going to fall in the middle range.
Sure.
But when they come on this end of the scale, the left side, that is the dark side, the objections, I want to help people deal with that. Okay, and the way that I'm teaching this is to do two things. When we get that objection, by the way, this is important, George, not all objections from all people all the time. I'm talking about the reflexive, knee-jerk response that says, no, before you even know what you're saying no to. Are you with me?
Right. Well, absolutely.
Right? We're talking about that small subset of customers who, in response to your genuinely sincere question of, may I ask why, say, oh, I already paid too much, I'm not interested. And I'm thinking it's those people who I feel like I need to ask a second time, but how can I do it without being pushy? I need to ask a second time because you said no from a place of ignorance, right? A place of not understanding that, heck, a tenants policy would bring a discount on the auto that practically pays for the tenants policy, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's true. Or an umbrella policy makes sense for you now that you've got a Tesla and your teenage driver is in this car because your risk has suddenly gone up significantly, right? And so here's the second big lesson that I teach CSRs. When you make an ask, a genuine ask of the type that I've taught, and the customer's first response is, no, I'm not interested, again, they don't understand what it is, then our job, the first thing we have to do is say, I hear you. Yeah, it can be expensive. Yes, it can be annoying. Yes, I pay a lot. It's empathy. Because think about it. When you say no in life, in your life, if you ask somebody something, or someone asks you something, George, and your first answer is no, what do you really want to hear?
Well, yes, I would like. Well, I'm not sure what you're looking for here.
Well, no, just listen. Listen to my question.
Yeah.
I just want you to be George Nordhaus for a minute and think, if someone comes up to George Nordhaus and they ask you something and you say, no, thank you, I'm not interested, what do you want that person to tell you? Or what do you want them to say?
Well, I do understand. I really do understand why you don't. I can, I'm so oriented in the sales that
you're the wrong guy to ask.
Probably.
I'll tell you what. Listen, I was hoping that you would connect to that fundamental, that universal principle among humans that says we want our truth affirmed. So if I tell you, oh, I don't want to pay more, and you tell me, yeah, but I want to hear agreement. If someone says no, they don't want to be argued with.
You're right.
Want to be said. You want to hear, okay, that's fine. I respect that. I'm not going to be pushy.
I just learned something again. I've been not doing that. Okay, thank you. I learned right there just exactly what I'm going to do. But then how do I turn the no back into yes?
Thank you. You set me. I couldn't have asked for a better segue. Okay, so I don't want you to turn it into a yes necessarily. I just want to, as a CSR, want a chance to ask you a second time, but not appear pushy. Right? I don't want to sound like I'm saying, yes, George, I understand it can be expensive, but I'm going to ask you anyway, even though you just told me no. What I want you to do is overcome again and ask again without, wrong slide, without being pushy. So the empathy sounds like this. I know exactly how you feel. Insurance can be expensive. If you tell me you had it at another agent, I'd say, oh, great. I'm glad you have that protection in place. And then I want you to think about these 7 words down here in the bottom of the screen. Can you read these? What does that say?
The only reason I ask is because...
Now stop right there. Just think about that answer. If you were going to fill in the blank, if you're a CSR and your manager asked you, hey, CSR, what is the reason that you're asking in the first place? Now, the cynics in us might say, well, the reason we're asking is because I have a sales quota, or the reason I'm asking is because you make me and you're the manager, or the reason I ask is because it's a sales contest. I'm like, look, you would never say that to a customer. The reason I ask is because I make $10 commission off of you. That you would never say that. and as a service person, I don't think that that's the thing that's very powerful to connect to. So my next slide says, why are we asking in the first place? Is it sales quota? Is it commission? Is it sales contest? If the answer is yes, I would say, hang on a second and connect to something more deep and more powerful than that. In fact, I think it's that when you ask because you're driven by money and what it's going to do for you, you lose a level of sincerity and authenticity that a customer can smell, and it's what's given sales a bad name. The reason that we ask is right here. What is you seeing that picture of, George?
A lot of people who are looking like no, not too thrilled. Remember,
these are people, these are just human beings. And the reason that I'm asking is because my job is to protect these people. So if I'm talking to a customer, listen, let's just back up, okay?
Okay.
You tell me, George, I just want you to pretend to the customer and say, oh, no, thanks, Sheldon. I already paid too much for my insurance. Say that.
No, thanks, Sheldon. I paid too much for my insurance already.
I hear you, George. You know what? It makes me crazy how much I pay. I've been paying insurance for 20 years, and I've never had a claim. It makes me crazy. It makes me crazy how expensive it is. You know, the only reason I'm asking you about this is because. Now, what is the reason I ask? I have to say, well, something like, George, the only reason I ask is because I really care, and I want to make sure that you understand what this protection does. In fact, when you add a tenant's policy on your auto, it brings the price of your auto policy down. In fact, it's one of the biggest discounts you get, to the point where this level of protection is almost free. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's great.
Okay, so that's what I mean when I say connect to the reason why. If the reason why is sales quota, commission, and contest, that's not powerful, it's not authentic, and I mean, it may be true. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making money, but making money, George, is the byproduct of leading with service. And if you lead with a connection to people, like look at all these people you said they're looking like nose and grouchy, and as I stare at their faces, they don't look very happy. I didn't notice that. I just tried to get an image of humanity.
Well, you did, and that's what we all are, I guess, when you start.
This is humanity is out there calling you for a vehicle change, and if you mention umbrella or tenants, or if you're a commercial CSR, you mention EPLI or cyber liability, most people don't know what it is, and they have a reflexive response to say, oh no, I'm not interested, because all I need is my car, or all I need is the bare bones. And my point is, if you could fill in the blank, the only reason I ask is because with something meaningful to you, let me go back to that slide. Sorry, wrong way. The only reason I ask is because I want to make sure you understand this, George. The only reason I ask is because as a small business owner, you have a lot of consumer data that might be subject to data breaches or network hacks, and something like cyber liability could protect you from that. And the only reason I ask is because we live in lawsuit-happy times, George, and I want to make sure that now you have this protection in place.
Got it.
You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So when I say handle objections by empathizing and asking again, the way you ask again is to connect to your core purpose. And the core purpose is, I'm a licensed professional who cares about this and it cares about you, and I know this stuff, and I owe it to you to make sure you get it. And if you say, oh, thanks for the explanation, Sheldon, no thanks, then you know what I would suggest?
What?
The CSR say, okay, no problem. I appreciate your time. I'm glad you let me explain this to you. In other words, you asked once, you asked twice, that's enough. That's all I'm saying.
I got it. Got it.
Okay. Are you with me?
Yeah, you know, and in a day-to-day operation, like people are calling me all day long to sell me something because I'm pretty visible, and so but I don't, you know, they don't really say the only reason I ask is because. I just never hear that. I never hear that. They just keep going, and finally, you know, you have to say yes or no, and but I like that. The only reason I ask is because I really care about you.
Well, but you have to. It has to be true. You have to really care. You can't care about this, right? If this is what, I mean, let me be careful how I rephrase that. Obviously, we care about making money. It's how we keep the lights on. It's how we feed our families.
Absolutely.
Right? It's how we feed our families. But when I coach CSRs who might be sales phobic, let's just say, or when I coach people who know that who are used to dealing with consumers who are sales phobic, right? There's research done about this. I believe I shared it on our first call by an author named Daniel Pink, who surveyed 10,000 people to get a pulse of American feelings about sales. And overwhelmingly, it's negative. People have negative reactions to sales and selling. Nobody wants to be sold. And I'm thinking, okay, if you're motivated by a quota or by commission, that kind of oozes out.
Yep.
I believe it does. I believe that we have to lead with this. We have to lead with our connection to people. Okay, I don't want to overstate that.
No,
some people might be dismissing this as overly idealistic, but I don't think it is. I think that when you connect to your true reason why, it has to be about protection. It has to be about education. Heck, you're licensed advisors, and so your job therefore has to be to give good, solid advice. And that's the only reason I'm asking. Mr. Jones, you don't have to get this. Mr. Jones, you can say no, but I just want to be sure you understand specifically how affordable this might be, and more importantly, how important this kind of protection is for your small business or your home or your auto or whatever it is. All right? So before I move on to this very last one of the big three, do you have any questions or comments, George, about what I just said?
No, I'm just kind of quiet because I'm thinking. I've been working on selling some new things, and I all of a sudden realize what I haven't said rather than what I have said. I'm going to start. I already learned something from you. We'll see. I'll let you know next time we record how it came out.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that I could offer you something.
No, you are. You really are.
So now let's suppose that the conversation is advancing, right? And George, you told me no, I can't afford it, right? And I said, George, I hear you. It feels like insurance is one of those things that's really expensive, and it is hard to afford. In fact, it kills me to write that check every month. But, you know, the only reason I'm asking you about this is because, and now I fill in that blank, right? I care, I want to make sure you get it, and I explain it to you, right? Mm-hmm. So let's suppose at the end of that explanation, you're my customer, and you're listening to that explanation, and it makes sense to you, right? What inevitably are you going to ask me?
Well, how much? I mean, when?
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. You're going to say, all right, Sheldon, I appreciate the explanation. How much? And so now I want to get into trial closing. Okay, so trial closing, I actually talk about it in 3 different ways here, George. The one I'm going to talk about first is in answer to your question, how much? Now, I know there's a lot of people going to hang up this phone in the next 10 seconds when they hear me mention the word ballpark estimates. So before you want to hang up or throw onions at me, I'm talking about only those instances where you can safely do it, and this is true very much in personal lines. It's much harder in commercial lines.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
but
of course.
If you've been in the business for a while, you have a general sense of, for example, what a personal umbrella would be at $1 million for a standard risk. Yeah. If you take a standard risk, this is someone without trampolines and swimming pools and 10 cars, but maybe a home and 2 cars, you know generally it's going to be in the $200 to $300 range, depending on the market. I was going to say 150
or something like when I first.
Okay, well, in other markets it might be 150.
Yeah, whatever. But I do understand what you're saying. It's not very much. You know it, right?
So and my suggestion when a customer says, "Oh, that's really interesting, but how much more is that going to be, Sheldon?" I would answer it like this. I say, George, if you qualify, I would say, George, it depends on a variety of things, and if you qualify, I generally see this come in the range of about $250 to $300 a year. Listen for it. How does that sound?
And
if you tell me that's too expensive, then I'm going to think, well, thank God I asked you, because I was about to waste time on a quote that I was going to throw over to you and you were going to ignore.
Right. Right.
So, but if you say, oh, that sounds reasonable, could you get me an exact quote? I would say, absolutely. Now it makes sense for me to go and do that work. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I teach that because so many times I hear CSRs saying, well, I don't know, let me send you a quote. And the customer says, okay, send me a quote. And then that customer falls off the face of the earth, or you're playing follow-up phone tag with this person, as opposed to assessing buying readiness right then and there. All right? The second way that I mean trial closing is even easier. It's a fancy way to say take the pulse. So let's just suppose, George, I asked you about, let's switch gears from personal lines to commercial lines.
All right.
And I said, hey, George, I've gone ahead and added your new snowplow, or no, I'm not going to use a snowplow. We've gone ahead and added this new employee for your workers' comp, right? And while I've got you on the phone, I noticed that you don't have protection in place for, it's called cyber liability. It's that protection that keeps you safe from things like data breaches or consumer data theft, any kind of those internet technology hacks that are going all over the country right now. Do you mind if I ask how come you don't have that in place?
You know, Sheldon, I've been hearing a lot about it as a business owner, but I never really thought it might happen to me to begin with, and I guess it could.
So that's what you might say, and then you would say, well, tell me about it, or I would say, let me tell you about it. And then after that explanation, here's what's important. You have to say something like, does that make sense, George?
Good. Get a commitment of some kind.
Well, not even a commitment. I'm just assuring understanding, right? I'm assuring, like, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I just explained to you cyber liability. And I want to say, hey, George, does that make sense? George, do you see why I would ask? George, do you see how that would work in your company?
Got it.
And if the answer is no, then I did a bad job explaining. I got to go back and re-explain. If the answer is yes, then I can move to items 1 and 2, the social contract and the ballpark. So say yes, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, George, so if you'd like, I could go ahead and start an application to get this protection in place. I just need you to answer a few questions, right? Then you're off to the races.
Good.
Then you're off to the races. Now I'm going to say, George, before I go, George, I'm going to go ahead and put this quote together for you. When is a good time for us to circle back and get this wrapped up?
Well,
that's social contracting.
Got it.
So sometimes a customer says, yes, send a quote, and the CSR says, okay, I'll send the quote. I'll send the quote right over. Or the customer will say, why don't you send that quote and I will get back in touch with you. Or send me this information and I will call you back. And my point is, sometimes the customer does that, but often the customer won't.
Got it. Right.
Do you agree? Like sometimes customers say they
sure.
will call you back.
Oh, yeah, they don't.
They will call you back, and they don't.
No, no, most of the time.
Okay, well, most of the time.
Yeah.
But what I believe is that we can create social contracts with people with the phrase as simple as, okay, George, I'm happy to call you back. I'll tell you what, I don't want this to slip through the cracks for either of us.
Mm-hmm.
When's a good time for us to circle back? I'd like to put it in my book, and I will call you whenever you tell me to.
Good. That's much better. I like it.
All right, and that's the question, because if I say, hey, George, no problem, I will call you back. Let's get it in my book so it doesn't slip through the crack. When would you like me to call you, and I will do it?
Yeah. Yep. You put it right to me, and I have to make that decision.
You're going to say 2 weeks from now. Go ahead. Say 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now, you can do it.
All right. Perfect, George. Let me just scroll ahead in my calendar. 2 weeks from now, that's going to make it December 3rd. I'm wide open that day. You tell me what time, and I will put it in my book, and I'll call you on December 3rd or December 2nd.
Perfect. 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to be here. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, George. Look, it's in my book. I will call you Friday, December 2nd at 10 o'clock.
Good.
Or did you say 10?
Yeah.
All right, boom. That's it. Now, again, I want to be very careful that your listeners aren't hearing me do social contracting the way a lot of sales reps were trained to trap people with language like, George, would you like me to call you on Tuesday at 1 or Friday at 3?
Yes. Too much.
I don't like that.
I don't either.
It feels like you're trying to box me in.
Push.
Yeah, it feels pushy. It feels like you're trying to trap me. But if you tell me, you the customer says, "Hey Sheldon, yeah, go ahead and send me the quote and I'll get back in touch." I can not be pushy by saying, "Super, George, I will absolutely get back in touch. Let me know when's a good time for me to call you so I can put it in my book."
Mm-hmm. I love
right?
it. Yeah.
That's me asserting a level of professionalism that a lot of you don't see a lot out there.
Right.
But if I've lo and behold 2 weeks later, I'm calling your voicemail, I'm calling you, and you're not there, I'm going to say, "Hey George, this is Sheldon. I had a schedule for a 10 a.m. phone appointment to wrap up this cyber liability protection. I'm sorry I didn't catch you in. Please call me." That bespeaks a level of professionalism that a lot of folks don't hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you agree. And the last slide that I want to share you, in fact, before I wrap this up, I just want to ask if you feel I was clear about articulating these big three: the ask, the trial close, and the overcome objection.
You were so much that, and before I did this, I was thinking how we could get this in the hands of all the CSRs. The more I think of it, it's got to be in the hands of every agent, every producer. It doesn't make a difference whether it's CSR or what otherwise. Everybody. This is the guts of selling. I love it.
Well, I love that you love it. And here's one of the things that I love. It's a phrase from Aristotle who says, "We are what we repeatedly do." Right? We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And if you're listening to this and sales excellence is important to you, I encourage you to think about trial closing. Encourage you to think about overcoming objections in the way that I taught, showing empathy, truly empathizing with your customer's truth because it's their truth. You shouldn't argue with it, but then reconnecting to why you asked in the first place. And then the other one is the simple 7-word ask. Those are the three, and if you take any one of those and and you embrace it, you have to do what Aristotle says, which is practice it again and again until it rolls off your tongue like with fluency. And with that, George, I want to say here's a link to a free download of a CSR Handbook of Essential Sales Wisdom that I created. Any of your users can download this for free as my gift.
Great.
I'm finished. So I appreciate your time and you're inviting me to speak.
I love it. It's not often that I get to speak with a professional speaker, and when I have you on here, I feel so good about it. And the more I'm sitting here thinking about it, the more I think that, well, I ran associations for 10 years when I first started in business, and one of the hardest things we always did was to find somebody who could really present. I suspect you do a lot of presenting at meetings, don't you?
I do, and I always want more. So if you've got association,
right.
A connection to an association, I would love that introduction because I'd love to take the show.
You're going to have it. For me, I'm going to send this and the previous one, the link, to every state association manager for you. I'm happy to do it. It's the least I can do. I should let people know that I don't pay people to be on these Monday mornings. They do it as and giving it back. They have, of course, they have something to sell themselves, which is a good thing, and they should. But I just thank you very much. Let me ask them before they. One other thing, how would they get hold of you other than getting that free thing? What's the best way?
That's my website, steadysales.com. It has my contact information on it. Just to email through that website. Sheldon, it's Steady Sales is the email, but that's obvious because there's a contact page. It's got my phone number. I'm happy to give that now. If you're still recording, 413-244-2294.
Well, I tell you what, if I were running an association, you'd be my lead-off speaker every year. I love it. It's just a great thing, and I've learned a lot too. So I'm going to pass this along. I'll be back in touch with you. We're going to do a lot of things in the future here, I think, and I'm so pleased that you work so hard and you do this job to where people learn. And by golly, I've learned. And what can I say? But thank you again. Okay, bud.
Thank you very much, George. I appreciate it.
My
All the best.
Yes, thank you. And the
We'll
rest of thank you. And the rest of you, I'll see you again on Monday